An Islamist communist leads the New York mayoral race. JD Vance reminds us what it really means to be an American. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I hope you had a great holiday weekend. I'm Jill Savage, joined by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Great to be back in Dallas. The weather isn't the same as California, but I can smell the freedom.
And we can see the tan on you. And let's go ahead and welcome in our D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford, as well, who got some sun down there in Georgia as well.
We have neither freedom nor good weather, so have fun with that.
Well, we are going to get
Georgia's nice, though.
All of the crazy topics, but that will actually have to wait until tomorrow because we actually have something really special for you today. So Matt actually, when he was in California getting all of that sun, was able to celebrate America's birthday in style. So tell us a little bit about your weekend.
Yeah, the only tan I get is red, but I do it anyway. I don't know. I do it anyway. California, of course, is a lovely place we used to live. I'm glad I'm not living there. I saw the burned out Malibu buildings on the PCH, beautiful, and then it looked like the third world. But we were there for a very important event. The Claremont Institute, which I've been associated with for a long time now, has this thing called the Statesmanship Award, and these are very serious scholars, serious intellectuals, and serious doers. And so when they give the Statesmanship Award these days, it actually means something. And as I was talking to the president, our friend Ryan Williams, he reminded me that this is an award they don't give out every year because, as you may surmise, I guess why? Because there aren't a lot of statesmen out there. And so the Statesmanship Award is a special one, and the fact that they gave it to the Vice President JD Vance, who is so young in his career, is notable. And it was just an incredible event. It was an incredible speech, and the Vice President demonstrated why he won that award when you just listened to his remarks.
Which is what we're going to do with the show today. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So during his speech, the Vice President laid out what it means to be an American. Take a look.
So I believe one of the most pressing problems for us to face as statesmen is to redefine the meaning of American citizenship in the 21st century. What does it mean to be an American in 2025? For one, I think it has to mean sovereignty. More precisely, American citizenship must mean belonging to a nation that guards the sovereignty of its people, especially from a modern world that's hell-bent on dissolving borders and differences in national character. And I think that means having a government that vigorously defends the basic qualities of sovereignty, that secures the border from foreign invasion, that protects its citizens and their enterprises against unfair foreign tax schemes, that erects tariff walls and similar barriers to protect its people's industry, that avoids needlessly entangling them in prolonged, distant wars. It also means preserving the basic legal privileges of citizenship, things like voting, including in state and local elections, or access to benefits like certain state-run healthcare programs for citizens. And if you pay attention, most of the howling about the big, beautiful bill reduces to the fundamental fact that President Trump believes that Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security ought to go to the American people, not to illegal aliens who don't have the right to be here. And when states, and of course we're in one right now, start handing out these benefits to illegal aliens, they cheapen the very meaning of citizenship. And a nation that refuses to make that distinction will not stay a nation for very long. I'd also say that citizenship in the 21st century necessarily means building, because America is not just an idea. We're a particular place with a particular people and a particular set of beliefs and way of life. Our ancestors realized that to carve a successful nation from new land meant creating new, tangible things, new homes, new towns, new infrastructure to tame a wild continent. That is our heritage as Americans. That attitude enabled us to build the world's greatest cities, its tallest skyscrapers, the most impressive dams and canals that the world had ever seen. Over time, of course, it expanded the horizons of what we even thought possible as human beings, with Americans taking our species into the air and just a generation later into Earth's orbit. Our innovations, American innovations, revolutionized communications, medicine, and agriculture, extending human lifespan decades at a time. And none of that would be possible if our citizens believed we lived in a post-industrial era. You can't get to the moon on financial derivatives. You get to the moon on engineering and on building things. We had an era where our finest minds just went to what are essentially speculative trades, or to writing software that makes us more efficient consumers. Again, these can be important and honorable professions, but they're not enough. And now, in the 21st century, is the time to build. We need to make great things here for the betterment of our fellow Americans, but also for our posterity. We need to continue to invent groundbreaking innovations and to leave homes and libraries and factories that our descendants will look at someday and feel a sense of awe. And we need to build together as one American family. Getting to the moon required a lot of brilliant scientists working on what were effectively pocket calculators and slide rules. But it also required a national system of education that produced that level of genius, that fostered that level of genius, that inspired young graduates to look to the stars and want to go there on behalf of their nation. And it required a ton of very talented engineers and welders and custodians to manufacture the cutting-edge engines and to keep the facilities that house them spotless. It was a national project in the truest sense of the phrase. It had PhDs and people who didn't graduate from high school. And I think to be a citizen in the 21st century must mean that we should be thinking about the future in similar ways and building similar projects as an American family. Citizenship should mean feeling pride in our heritage, of course, but it should also mean understanding milestones like the moon landings, not only as the products of the past national greatness, but as achievements we should surpass by aligning the goals and ambitions of Americans at all levels of society. And by the way, when we went to the moon, when we built the great future of the post-war era, we did it with our fellow citizens. And we should reject whether it's Democrat politicians or corporate oligarchs who say that we can only build the future by importing millions and millions of low-wage serfs. We can do it with American citizens. We've just got to have the will to actually try.
Well, you just heard Vance's definition. So let's get into what it means, just the American citizenship overall and how it's different now, Matt, than it was during the founding.
Yeah, I think the vice president really made an important point here. I mean, he pivoted from statesmanship, right, which is what the award is. And he said, if you are a statesman now, you should be concerned with what citizenship is, because after all, citizenship is what makes us all part of the nation. And so this is a very serious topic. It's tied to everything that we talk about, everything going on in the news, everything the Trump administration is trying to do. And what you need to understand is that this notion has changed over time, Jill. It's changed quite a bit. At the time of the founding, this really meant that you were all, you had friendship in terms of the regime under which you lived. And in Republican citizenship, you the people are actually supposed to govern yourselves and govern, the rest of the country, really and truly. And what has happened over the last century, really, is that citizenship is almost like a benefit program. It's like you get bennies by becoming a citizen. You want to become a citizenship to get your benefits. And the sort of notion of responsibility, of duty, and of its importance have gone away. So it's almost to the point where we've diminished it so much that it's just a kind of status that you get in order to get certain benefits. And that's the way it's treated by American elites. And so when he says we need to redefine that, and part of it is going back to what it was, and part of it is defining it in a way that makes sense for the 21st century.
Yeah, Chris, what do you think it means to actually be an American citizen right now in the year 2025? There are so many different things that are going on in the news cycle all the time, but when it all gets down to it, what does it mean to be an American citizen?
Well, it's certainly more than simply an idea, and it's certainly more than just a bunch of privileges. It is also a bunch of responsibilities. It's duties. These are the essential aspects of a citizen. the duty to be a active and intelligent and informed participant in your community and in your state and local governance, and every few years in your federal governance as well. The duty to sign up for the draft and be willing to answer that call if it comes. A duty to pay your taxes. A duty to be part of this United States in this project. But I also think that there's something that we've gotten really off in this complete and total uh, demand that America is just an idea, not a place, and not a people with shared history and shared values and largely shared religion, shared borders, shared language. When you make it just an idea and you make us cogs in a global economic machine like that are interchangeable, the way the vice president was talking about, you really water it down. And we also have to understand that there's a difference between being a citizen and being American. There are certainly citizens here who are new. You can buy citizenship now through a program that President Trump and the Treasury Secretary put together to help bring money into this economy. Does that make a guy from Cyprus or a guy from Hungary or a guy from Turkey an American? Not any more than me getting my Irish citizenship, which I'm allowed to do, would make me Irish. Maybe I've got Irish heritage. And the Vance kind of touched on that, and it's an interesting subject that he has a little bit of moral ability to be able to make, and as long as your personal lived experience is what informs your ability to weigh in on important subjects like this, as the left always insists. You know, his wife is an American, born and raised, American citizen, raised with American values, raised the whole way, understanding the history of this country, helping pushing forward. She's an American. Her parents were U.S. citizens, but they were not American. They wouldn't have considered themselves that. They were immigrants to this country. They're the same way where if I immigrated to Britain and became a British citizen, I could become a Brit, but I would not be English. And that's something that we overlook the importance of. Now, the president of the United States is the only office I'm aware of where the person must be a natural born citizen on U.S. soil. Remember, that was a big to do when Senator John McCain ran because he was born abroad on a military base. That's something that people have brought up with Elon Musk. Of course, that's something that was frequently brought up where President Barack Obama's was actually from. And you hear that from Trump's initial entrance into politics. But we don't talk about it, for example, which we're going to get to later in the show with the mayor of New York or with some members of the squad who represent parts of this country that look a lot more like Somalia and act a lot more like Somalia and practice the religion of Somalia and don't like America like Somalia, but seem to be in America and have U.S. citizenship. We're uncomfortable talking about that kind of reality, that those people, a lot of them, may be citizens, but if they're Somali, that's where they're from, that's where they're raised, that's their culture, that's their language, that's their history, and their children might not be. But that's the reality for a lot of them. And you see different results with that. And you see different feelings about the United States from a homegrown businessman in Iowa than you do with a billionaire Indian tech CEO who was born in that country and came over here. The commitment to the ideals of the United States beyond prosperity, benefits, defense, and the freedom to say what you want, that is not always valued at quite the highest level. And sometimes it is. I know a lot of people who really, truly, deeply do and try to give this to their children and raise them like that. But it's not universal and it's not an automatic truth.
One of the things that I like about JD Vance is that when he was going through the campaign trail, he always made it feel like things were bigger and possible than even just what we are able to do ourselves. And Matt, I think in this speech, he pointed that out, right? With going to the moon and just going through and just coming together as a unified nation and building and having national projects and trying to get the most out of everyone. Is anything like that even possible in this day and age?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important thing that you see Trump almost memeing into existence by saying, no, this is going to be the golden age and we're going to build things and we're not going to stagnate, damn it. And this is not the time for depression. We are going to dream big and build big. And that's something that the president certainly has been about his entire life. And so I really think that people they discount that as if it's just, talk. It's not talk because it's the mindset that comes with citizenship. And what Vance does in this speech is, first he says, we need to go back to sovereignty. So if you're a citizen, That means you have the ability to decide who you let into your country. That's supposed to be your, decision. You and your fellow citizens actually are supposed to run the country. People are so disenfranchised right now, right? Even if they can vote, they feel as if they're subjects and not citizens. And one of the ways to reinvigorate citizenship is to say, no, this is your country. And the positive side of that is you can build things. We will help you build things. We need to dream big. We need to band together to do large national projects again. And that's really, really important stuff, because that can also help. It's like a circle. They sovereignty, realizing that you actually are in charge or should be in charge as citizens, and being able to build things. Those things go together, right? Because if you think you're just a subject, a serf, you think you have no say, you think your citizenship really doesn't mean anything other than like a benefits card, then all of a sudden you're going to act like that, right? You're not going to go out and dream big and do the things that some of these people have shown can still be done. I mean, Musk, for whatever his problems are right now, I mean, he's one of these guys who has gone out and achieved great things and dreamed big. And so I really think that Vance is also about a positive vision. He understands this can't just be negative. This can't just be like old school conservatism, bitching about how terrible things are and everything's declining. We actually have to have a vision for the future. And the thing that I respect the most about the man is that he's been thinking about that, right? He's been thinking about, what is the positive vision? What does that look like in the 21st century? What is our way of life? What should it be? And that's really significant stuff. I just can't say enough about it, because I don't gush over politicians very much at all. I really don't like most of them at all. But it's so rare that someone actually thinks about that. And now you can see him starting to lay something positive out, and that was really interesting.
You can think about all the positivity when you look at what's going on with JD Vance, but there is something that throws a cog into that wheel, and that is called communism. JD Vance is going to talk about that and the potential New York mayor right after this. Real quick before we get back to the show, we need to talk about the ranchers in this country. Don't let them down, because, the grocery store meat is coming from overseas. Support American workers and American family farms. You've heard me say it. 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef in stores is imported. That's why you need to get all your meat from goodranchers.com. They sell only 100% American meat. It's born, raised, and harvested right here on local family farms. And it's really good. We know it's summertime right now. There's nothing better than grilling with your friends and family. We have steaks and burgers and chicken and all the wild-caught seafood. You'll be able to taste the difference. Every box supports American ranchers, and right now, if you subscribe, you'll get your pick of free meat for life. You can pick from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box. Plus, if you use my code Jill, you'll get an extra $40 off at checkout. It's goodranchers.com, code Jill. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard that New York's next mayor could be a Muslim communist. It sounds crazy to most Americans, but JD Vance explained what propelled Zohran Mamdani to beat Andrew Cuomo in the Democrat primary. Watch.
Last week, as become sort of the main political story over the last couple of weeks, a 33-year-old communist running an insurgent campaign beat a multi-million-dollar establishment machine politician in the New York Democratic mayoral primary. Now, I don't want to harp too much on a municipal election, but there were two interesting threads that I think came out of Mamdani's victory that I think are worth us understanding, because they're reflective of where the broader American left is at this moment in time. The first is that it drives home just how much the voters in each of the respective parties have changed. If President Trump's victory in 2024 was rooted in a broad working and middle class coalition, Mamdani's coalition is almost the inverse of that. If you look at his electoral performance precinct by precinct, what you see is a left that is completely left behind the broad middle of the United States of America. This is a guy who won high-income and college-educated New Yorkers, and especially both young, highly educated New Yorkers, but he was weakest among black voters and weakest among those without a college degree. That's an interesting coalition. Maybe it works in the New York Democratic primary. I don't think it works particularly well in the United States at large. He did particularly well in the Bangladeshi areas of New York, but he did particularly poorly with non-Bangladeshi Asian immigrants, particularly Chinese Americans. And if you look at the precincts where he did the best, it was in New York's gentrifying neighborhoods, places like Ridgewood and Bushwick, places I haven't heard anything about, but I read about in a paper. His victory was the product of a lot of young people who live reasonably comfortable lives, but see that their elite degrees aren't really delivering what they expected. And so their own prospects with all the college debt may not in fact be greater than those of their parents. And I say that not to criticize them, because I think that we should care about all the people in our country, particularly those downwardly mobile, college-educated people who feel like the American dream is not quite all it's cracked up to be. But we have to be honest about where his coalition is. It is not the downtrodden. It is not poor Americans. It is not about dispossession. It's about elite disaffection and elite anger. The party of highly educated but downwardly mobile elites, they comprise a highly energetic activist base, but it's important because it's not just the elites, the college-educated New Yorkers. That base was supplemented by carefully selected ethnic blocs carved out of the electorate using identity politics as the knife. And that, by the way, I think explains Mamdani's bizarre appeals to foreign politics intended to signal to one particular group of New Yorkers or another. Let us ask ourselves, why is a mayoral candidate in our nation's biggest city whining about banning Bibi Netanyahu, a country whose population is about the same size as that of New York, and threatening to arrest a foreign leader if he tries to come to New York City? Why is a New York mayoral candidate attacking Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, as a war criminal? Why is he talking about globalizing the Intifada? In fact, what the hell does that even mean in Manhattan? But what might seem like a contradiction makes a little bit of sense if you peel back the onion. Consider a movement that rails against the billionaire class, despite the fact that the billionaire class remains firmly in the quarter of the modern left. A movement that idolizes foreign religions, even as it rejects the teachings of those faiths. It rails, this new modern left, against white people, even as many of its funders and its grassroots activists are privileged whites themselves. Now, I may not speak for many of you, but I was once comforted by these contradictions within the modern left. How could privileged whites march around with a straight face decrying white privilege? How could progressives pretend to love conservative Muslims despite those Muslims' views on gender and sexuality? But the answer is obvious if you think about it, and it's a very, very dangerous and very sad answer. The radicals of the far left, they don't need a unifying ideology of what they're for, because they know very well what they're against. What unites Islamists, gender studies majors, socially liberal white urbanites, and big pharma lobbyists, it isn't the ideas of Thomas Jefferson or even of Karl Marx. It's hatred. They hate the people in this room. They hate the President of the United States. And most of all, they hate the people who voted for that President of the United States in the last election in November.
So Bedford, let's go out to you for this one, because the Democrat analysis is what we love from you especially. So what do you make of Vance's assessment of this left-wing coalition that we're seeing right now?
You know, it was so spot on that I broke embargo and sent it to a friend who's dealing with this with his parents right now. Now, his parents, don't worry, we didn't publish it. I said, holy smokes, this nailed it. Because he couldn't get to the bottom of it. You know, he's one of his father's mother and father were in Auschwitz. His mother survived, his father did not. He got his grandparents, excuse me. They fled to South Africa, had a family there, but because of his family's history, he's very guarded all the time against anti-Semitism and despotism and other dangers that can turn what seemed like a civilized society very uncivilized very quickly. Uh, and because of that, he really hates Donald Trump. Like he's gone a little crazy about it. And this person is a very well educated, very successful, wealthy doctor, former ranking federal official in the health services. So this is someone who really knows their stuff and is a kind and like gentle person. But in politics, he gets really crazy. And his wife is a very well educated person who leads foundations. She's retired now, but also completely filled with this sort of loathing. And at the same time, despite being so afraid, seeing fascists behind every shadow and Nazis around every corner, they, as New Yorkers, they're totally fine with this mayoral candidate. You got to wonder, their son could not figure this out. What is driving this? Don't you see globalized intifada is something which I know we're going to talk about later, but that's something that's very serious. But what unites them is that mutual hatred. And my wife got asked on one of the Sunday shows, "What do you make of this? Why won't he walk this back? The political dangers in New York. Why isn't this something that he'll say, you know what, I got ahead of my skis or something?" And her answer was correct. It's because he believes it. You have to eventually start to understand that folks who say things believe it. And if the ideas that he is bringing to this country and talking about in this mayoral race sound foreign, then to my point in the A block, it's because they are. They're not the kind of ideas. And we've had a lot of corrupt politicians in New York. We've had a lot of immigrants. It's a city filled with immigrants. You could probably walk 25 blocks and hear more languages than that in Manhattan or Queens or Brooklyn, and it's a cool place to visit. But this is a whole departure from what we've seen before with this great American city, and it's a serious threat. And I think the vice president's analysis of what's uniting this disparate coalition is not just defense of the victims and defense of the powerless, and some of the things that have traditionally united the global and the American left, which is seeing society as oppressors and oppressed as opposed to civilization and barbarism. A lot of what drives and unites them, if anything unites them much anymore, is mutual loathing. I can kind of understand that. That's how libertarians and fiscal conservatives, et cetera, and hawks and social cons all ended up having to share a car for 30 years in the American conservative movement. There's mutual hatred of communism. Sometimes those groups didn't get along, and that eventually came to a head over the last 10 years or so. But this is a coalition that's not even largely driven by values. The working class values, the green values have gone by the wayside. I mean, look at Obama, President Biden's and the Treasury Secretary, the Transportation Secretary's response to a town in Ohio being nuked essentially by a train disaster or chemicaled. This is something that is perfectly in the Democrats' wheelhouse. You've got safety regulations, you've got environmental degradation, you've got regulation of rails and corporations that's put a ton of money into American politics. Trains may not be at their heyday, but boy, do they pay for a lot of politicians, and they have a lot of sway because they have a lot of economic interests in states. And yet they couldn't even bring themselves to look at it. Why? It's because it was a Trump voting red town. It was something that they just didn't like, and they didn't see the positives of what American liberalism had once previously stood for, or the venom you're seeing coming out of that pediatrician, a literal children's doctor in Houston, Texas, earlier today, posting on Facebook about how these children who were washed away from a girls' Christian summer camp, from all ethnicities, by the way, deserved it because the way their parents voted and blessed their heart, or from an appointee in the Houston government who runs a nonprofit farmers market or something, coming out and saying, these people are awful, they deserve it, they're segregationists, all this insanity. That is hate. That is pure hate.
All right, I'm going to turn to our editor-in-chief now and ask him to ignore the fact that you didn't abide by the embargo. We're going to pretend that didn't happen, Bedford. But I want to ask you, MP, are conservatives actually going through and underestimating Mamdani in just everything that's going on right now in New York City?
No, it's a great question. I mean, my personal side here is wrong, right? Because I feel as if, in my heart, I want to believe this is ridiculous. This guy's not a serious person. I mean, I know he's a human being, but he's not a serious political figure. I can't bear to listen to this stuff. It's a mishmash of, millennial soup of bad ideas. It sounds terrible to me. It's hard for me to take it seriously. But, at this event is not only the vice president, I think Charlie Kirk also, without speaking out of school, gave some public remarks about the danger here, because he does represent where a lot of these people are. So beyond the hatred that unites them all, that Chris is pointing out, the vice president hammered home, this pastiche of ideas that are contradictory, that all flow together, it comes naturally to a lot of people in his class. These are wealthier people. A lot of them are white. They have all these strange progressive ideas that are in this mishmash together, and they eat this stuff up. So there are a lot of people like him, and if he becomes the guy, the argument at this event was, you're going to have a bunch of copycats throughout the country where you're going to get a lot of lefties who are just going to eat this stuff up, and you're going to get a lot of candidates like this guy. So as much as I want to say this is silly, this is out of control, America is moving in the other direction, I think we really have to take it seriously.
Well, it's America's birthday over the weekend when this was all going on. We are going to get to JD Vance's, some of his most fiery comments after this. For those of you who don't know, Zohran Mamdani is an immigrant to the United States. So on July 4th, he decided to show his gratitude for America by calling it contradictory and unfinished on X. Here's what Vice President JD Vance had to say in response.
And that brings me back, finally, to the next likely mayor of New York. Today is July 5th, 2025, which means, as all of you know, that yesterday we celebrated the 249th anniversary of the birth of our nation. Now, the person who wishes to lead our largest city had, according to multiple media reports, never once publicly mentioned America's Independence Day in earnest. But when he did so this year, this is what he said, and this is an actual quote. Quote, "America is beautiful, contradictory, unfinished. I am proud of our country even as we constantly strive to make it better." End quote. There is no gratitude in those words. No sense of owing something to this land and the people who turned its wilderness into the most powerful nation on earth. Zohran Mamdani's father fled Uganda when the tyrant Idi Amin decided to ethnically cleanse his nation's Indian population. Mamdani's family fled violent racial hatred, only for him to come to this country, a country built by people he never knew, overflowing with generosity to his family, offering a haven from the kind of violent ethnic conflict that is commonplace in world history, but it is not commonplace here. And he dares, on our 249th anniversary, to congratulate it by paying homage to its incompleteness and to its, as he calls it, contradiction. I wonder, has he ever read the letters from boy soldiers in the Union Army to parents and sweethearts that they'd never see again? Has he ever visited the gravesite of a loved one who gave their life to build the kind of society where his family could escape racial theft and racial violence? Has he ever looked in the mirror and recognized that he might not be alive were it not for the generosity of a country he dares to insult on its most sacred day? Who the hell does he think that he is?
So, Matt, I think that everybody after this, I want to stand up and start cheering after I saw this part. What were your thoughts there in the room just as this is going on and you hear somebody that is the vice president say something like that?
I was sitting with a friend at the table looking across at him as JD Vance made, increasingly more based statements, as the kids say. and said some things that just really needed saying. And then when it got to this part, everyone just stood up and started applauding. And it was a remarkable moment. I mean, because this is the kind of thing that you just weren't allowed to say for many years, but it's the sort of thing that needs to be said. And the fact that the vice president said it in no uncertain terms is a beautiful thing in my mind, a great thing, and a step forward for this country, because this is how you make citizenship in the manner he's talking about it mean something again. You can't let people berate you and adopt this ingratitude as a sort of style of speech. It's disgusting. It's revolting, and it revolts many good Americans, and it needs to be called out. So I think that's a significant moment for someone of his stature to come out and say, who the hell does this guy think he is? And I think a lot of New Yorkers feel the same, and that is the growing rift in this country. But what's important here is to point out the ingratitude and the lack of decorum, and the fact that there's something wrong with your soul if that's the way you approach your country, which you should have a lot of gratitude for.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's kind of crazy. When we look at elected officials, it should be a bare minimum that you actually have some basic pride in your country. And yet we see all the time now that's not necessarily a requirement anymore.
I think one of the most telling quotes was from Michelle Obama when her husband was her first nominee for the Democratic presidency, where she said this is the first time she's been truly proud of her country. That's a serious issue. And that's one of the things that separated that summer of love in 2020 from what we saw in the 1960s, which people kept on pointing to was very violent, was back then, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you were the Democratic mayor of Chicago or Republican congressman or whoever, you still believed in law and order. You still believed in this country. You still believed in Christopher Columbus and July 4th and the military service. And that was an essential thing. The leaders of this country still believed in this country, even if the kids in the streets didn't always do that. The terrorists making bombs in their rich parents' basements didn't always believe it. But those terrorists and kids grew up to be the politicians, and that's the sort of thing that you see now, and it's become normalized. So it's great to see people calling it out.
Yes, well, it is great to actually finally see it. People need to start standing up every which way. But guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more to wrap it up right after this. There was so much more in JD Vance's speech than what we were able to just showcase here on The Mandate. So you can catch the entire thing on Blaze TV and the Blaze TV YouTube channel at 7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning on July 8th. So Matt, let's start with you. So what was your biggest takeaway from JD Vance in his address there that night?
Well, I think there's two things. One is what we just talked about, his slapping down of Mamdani, but there's a purpose to that. And the larger point was we do have to redefine citizenship in the 21st century. He's aware of that, and he's pointing to some big issues that we need to tackle. And just talking about sovereignty in the way he did, making sure that we don't consider America as some like ghostly idea, some kind of formless thing it's floating in the ether, and talking about what it means to be an American, the sort of heritage and shared experience that Chris is talking about at the beginning of the show. It's huge. It's so important to have leaders talking about that. So redefining citizenship, reasserting sovereignty. That's a big deal, and I hope he continues talking in this way as he moves, throughout the country. Because if he doesn't, we really are in danger of losing that. And there's an aspect of this that is really important, and we're in media, right? And you're all cynical out there because we've seen people yap, talk. This is a time where we want to see people do and accomplish real things. But there is still a place where words really do matter. And I would argue that is when you have civic leaders trying to instruct or re-instruct, the citizenry about what we need to accomplish together. That's really important. And you don't get it any other way. You do have to communicate those things. So the fact that Vance is willing to do that and the vice president has started to fill out that positive vision, I think that's my takeaway.
Well, Chris, we've already seen JD Vance give so many speeches that have been so well received, and this is going to go down as another one. So when you look at this, what is going to be the lasting impact that you see from this one?
Oh, this is great. And I look forward to everyone else being able to watch this entire speech because it's phenomenal work. Vance is so important and stands out from other politicians in that he's such an ideas guy. He's not someone who's just reactionary. He's someone who's painting a positive vision. He's someone who's diagnosing real issues and has been since he first entered the scene with his hit book. This is someone who comes very much from the, the the harder hit areas of the United States, the places that were left behind, the places that don't make it anymore, and bears that with him. And unlike a lot of other politicians, you're wondering who in the office wrote that op-ed, who in the office wrote that interesting article. You know, these ideas are coming from him. He's a voracious reader. He's a serious thinker, and he's going to be playing a really important part. So I wish I was there with you, Matt. It sounded like a wonderful evening, but I'm glad that Claremont gave this award.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Chris, right? We weren't there, but Matt was able to go. You would think that, maybe there would be an invite extended to some of his favorite co-hosts, but no, we're just going to have to rely on Matt and ask him what it was actually like to be there in the room at that time. Just tell us the things that we aren't going to see on camera, because yes, everybody is going to have an opportunity to see the entire speech, but it had to be different being there in the room.
First off, you guys were always going to be welcome to Claremont events. You're always welcome. And of course, Chris is a Lincoln Fellow, as it turns out. Look, I think that this was a very warm room with a lot of energy. I mean, there's a certain rock star quality to politicians these days. Sometimes I rip on that. I don't necessarily like it all the time, but this guy is clearly coming into his own. He's exciting. He's dynamic. He's young. People were very excited to be there, first off, and there was a lot of electricity, but also it represented something larger, and that was really the coming of age of the new right. I mean, if you looked around that room, you saw, many colleagues and people who had worked for a long time to bring about the sort of policy changes that JD Vance and others have been advocating for now in the age of Trump 1, the first administration. So, our friend Michael Anton was there, many other Claremontsters, some in the administration, some out. And to me, it was, you saw the birth of sort of the new movement. We're past the birthing stage now, right? Now it's coming into its own. It's coming into adulthood. People understand the sorts of ideas that he was talking about. People in the audience, they get it. They're leading on this, and they're actually being responded to by politicians who care about reality. So that's a big deal because not that long ago, you would never expect a vice president to be this guy, to be actually young, smart, charming, thoughtful about what was going on, speaking about reality on the ground. You would have expected a speech that was the pro forma gibberish, that had all the same tropes that meant nothing to anyone anymore. So many people were, just done in the 2000s, like with the Republicans. I mean, they all sound the same. And that era is completely over now. And now all of a sudden you see, sort of rising maturity. It's not young anymore. It's now really time to build, as he said. So it was symbolic that way. And it was really wonderful to see.
Let's go on building great things. So, Chris, with about 2 minutes here or so, I want to look at just the positivity, because everybody that's watching the news today is like, there is a lot to talk about, and we will absolutely get back to that tomorrow. But it still is important to go through and look and how America can go through and build big and great things once again.
It is, and it's great. We all know that our friend Elon has a fairly obsessive personality. Do you think, Matt, that you could introduce him to cigarettes? Because that's what got us to the moon. It's not any of these other things. Isn't it? Weed wasn't what got us to the moon, and I don't think it's going to get us to Mars. But cigarettes, nicotine, that's the sort of thing probably that powers so much of the American greatness. And this reindustrialization is essential. We're so far past the stage where we have President Barack Obama waving his hand and saying, well, I hope Donald Trump has a magic wand to bring back companies. These are government policies, the carve-outs we've given to universities, the carve-outs we've given to newspapers, the carve-outs we've given to corporations, the specific carve-outs and privileges that have been granted by American lawmakers, and they've led us astray. And cracking down on that sort of thing and rebuilding here is essential, because it's not just about GDP. Y'all know what it's like when a friend or a family member loses their job, especially if that person's a man or a sole provider, because then they become, the sadness enters them. It's not just in their bank account. It's a spiritual thing. We're spiritual creatures, and that side needs to be nurtured. the Christian reawakening that we're actually living through, which is incredible in our time. I'm seeing it every day in Catholic churches and every weekend across the country when I travel. There are places that are once empty are now packed with young people. That's essential. There's a lot of really good signs. And those politicians talking about important things, and those people who want to go back and say, "Well, Ronald Reagan would let corporations destroy us," which is totally ridiculous. They're being beaten up. There's important voices out there talking about this, and I'm extremely hopeful.
Yeah, hope is definitely back. I should say though, just for the audience's sake, for all this praise, I think we all have some questions about some of what's going on in this administration today, and I think a lot of people out there do too. And this was a great moment. This speech is really worth watching and considering. But I have to say, I mean, is everything in this speech, does it all comport with what some members of the administration are saying now about, immigration? I don't know. I mean, we have some serious questions need to start to be asked about the administration, because not everyone within it, seems to be going along with what many people consider the Trumpian agenda. So I think that, there's going to be the usual, debates and hard questions that will need to be asked by Blaze about the entirety of the agenda, what's going on. I mean, Epstein is something we got to talk about tomorrow. There's a lot of debate within the administration as the rubber hits the road, and so for all of our praise today, we're not taking off the journalism hat. We'll be back at it tomorrow.
No, I believe in the business they call that foreshadowing. We are absolutely going to get back into the hard news topics tomorrow. But Bedford, with the last 30 seconds or so that we have with you, just kind of going off of that, like, okay, it's okay to pause and look at the bigger picture, but there's a lot of stuff happening in your city right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, we learned today from our friends in the administration and the Department of Justice that Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for human trafficking to no one. That's an interesting aspect of this. And the sort of thing that just feeds into the conspiracy theories. There's certainly some people, to what Matt's talking about, who are not in line and not reading from the same hymnal. That's going to be an issue. But the cool thing about this that changes it from what we saw in the administration that began in 2017 in the first term is that those people are the minority.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the folks who are winning right now, in many cases, are the people who are correct. And the president, it seems to be unwavering in a lot of these different aspects of it. He's stuck the course right now, as our own Aaron likes to point out, Blaze's own Aaron likes to point out, it is always worthwhile to chimp out when you see a bad policy come out.
Yes.
It makes an impact.
Yes. So we are going to get in through all of these things tomorrow. Where does the party go from here? What do we need to do with Elon? What are we even going to talk about? Where do we even start with amnesty? There are so many things that we'll get back to with tomorrow's show. But again, we are so happy that Matt got to go through and see JD Vance over the weekend and represent all of us in doing so. But you'll be able to watch the entire interview with the Vice President on the BlazeTV YouTube channel at 7 a.m. Eastern on July 8th. That's going to do it for us here on the show tonight. We'll be back with all that hard news topics tomorrow.